I am Reverend Dr. Henry Lee Bates, coming to you live from Palm Springs, California. I'm teaching from the wisdom of the ancients, the truth given to us by the Mastermind Jesus, and the practical mysticism of the science of mind and spirit. You can find out more about this ministry by going to www.revbates.com or by visiting the Way to a Wonderful Life channel on youtube.com. Just type in the YouTube search box Rev Bates, that is REVBATES, as one word, and you'll find over 500 of my radio messages with additional recordings in both English and Spanish that you can listen to 24/7. Now, the goal of this ministry is to bring us into the realization that the power of life is within us. The power of life is within us. Now, our Way for a Wonderful Life message for today is titled, Delving into the Power of the Mind. Delving into the Power of the Mind. And this is going to be kind of deep for some people. Other people, it's going to be a reminder of something they already know and feel to be true. So we're going to take this time, this opportunity, to really delve into the power of the mind and let ourselves be allowed to open our mind to something more expansive and something more fascinating to us that we can realize for ourselves in a greater way. Each and every one of us, every day, have an opportunity to live our life in a different way, to live our life in a more wonderful way, a more prosperous way, a happier way, feeling a greater sense of joy, whatever that feeling that comes to us of joy brings into our mind. So we want to think about intuition, that part of us that's always available, always working for us, always coming to us when we need it to guide us and direct us. The great Carolyn Myss, spiritual teacher, says it's the voice of your gut instinct. It's the voice that never turns off. So intuition is something we're going to get into a little bit more today. But first we're going to look at some words from the great Judge Thomas Troward in his book, The Hidden Power. He writes, it is the thought which determines the quality of the action and not vice versa. And since thought is free, it is at liberty to direct itself to the highest principle, which thus spontaneously reproduce themselves in the outward acts, so that both thoughts and actions are brought into harmony with the great eternal laws and become one in purpose with the universal mind. The person realizes that they are no longer bound by the consequences of their former deeds done in the time of their ignorance. In fact, that they never were bound by them except so far as they believed they were and gave them this power by false conceptions of the truth, and thus recognizing themselves for what they really are, the expression of the infinite spirit in individual personality. They find that they are free, that they are a partaker of divine nature, not losing their identity, but becoming more and more fully themselves with an ever-expanding perfection, following out a line of evolution whose possibilities are inexhaustible. So think about those words. These were written like over 100 years ago. But in truth, they're just as relevant today as they ever were. So we think about thought, which determines the quality of the action. In other words, how we think about things, how we think about the things that concern us, the things that are going on in the world around us, determines the actions that we take each and every day. And sometimes people think, oh, I'm not important, that it doesn't make a difference what I think or what I feel, but absolutely that's incorrect. Who you are makes a difference. Who you are makes a difference, especially in your own life experience. So who we are, that level of mind that's below the objective level of mind, the conscious level of mind, that subjective mind, that soul level of mind, is always seeking to bring forth to us that something greater, that something more wonderful, if we just let the ideas flow through us, flow from our soul level mind to our conscious mind, to our surface mind, so that we can recognize what it is that we want, what it is that we want to have in our life experience. So how do we know our expectations are valid for us? Because a lot of times people have these great expectations, but they don't really think about the consequences of those expectations or what they have to prepare themselves for in order to realize those expectations. Because every one of us have a purpose. If we have life, we have a purpose. There's a reason why we're here. So if we realize that we have a purpose, and we're not feeling like our purpose is any great deal or any big thing, or it's not really worthy of recognizing, then it comes back to us to open our mind to something better and greater for ourselves. Judge Troward is telling us that we are all linked to this universal mind. You know, in the scriptures, in the book of Genesis, even the primitive people realize that we are the nature of spirit, that power, intelligence of the spirit is moving through each and every one of us, that we're an inlet and an outlet for the expression of the one spirit, the one mind. Mind and spirit are the same. They're synonymous, just like soul and consciousness are synonymous. So we can become more. We can become greater. Think of these words from Thomas Troward. My mind is the center of divine operation. The divine operation is always for expansion and fuller expression. The divine operation is always for expansion and fuller expression, and our mind is a center of divine operation. Think how incredible that is. And this means a production of something beyond what has gone before, something entirely new, not included in past experience, though proceeding out of it by an orderly sequence of growth. Therefore, since the divine cannot change its inherent nature, it must operate in the same manner in you and me, consequently in our own special world, of which we are the center, and it will move forward to produce new conditions, always in advance of any that have gone before. Those are amazing words. But so many times we're stuck in limitation because we've been brainwashed into believing that we're limited. You know, people say, well, if I only had the money. Well, all it takes to have the money is to have the right ideas. We must get rid of that limitation in our mind that we're limited by money. We're not limited by money. We're not limited by our education. We're not limited by anything but limitation itself. A belief in limitation is the one and only thing that causes limitation. Because we can gradually grow into any condition we desire, provided we first make ourselves in a habitual mental attitude of the person that corresponds to those conditions. You know, it's like when I first got my job, when I came off the farm. I was raised on a farm in Missouri, and I first got my first job at the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, and I was buying clothes to wear for my new job. And my father told me, dress the way you would dress if you were in a job greater than the one that you're going into. And he didn't mean that I should go in with Brooks Brothers suits, because at that time, that was a copy boy job. Can you imagine a copy boy at a newspaper wearing Brooks Brothers suits? But he said to dress professionally, to be clean, to have my clothes ironed, to always look like I was my clothing was well kept. To keep my focus on looking greater than what people would expect me to look for the job that I had at the time. That was great advice, great advice. So remember, if we have life, we have purpose. If we have life, we have purpose. But we have to give up the need to know what happens tomorrow, and we have to give up judgments and comparisons. Comparisons are the most horrendous thing we do to ourselves. When we compare ourselves to other people, that's how we become so depressed. Depression follows comparison. The only thing we must do is take an interest in our life. The secret to enjoying life is to take an interest in it. Take an interest in your job. Sometimes people say, oh, my job is just a dead-end job. Well, the dead end didn't start with the job. The dead end started in the mind of the person that sees it as a dead-end job. We must take an interest in everything we do, even mundane, everyday things. The right idea can change them for the better and make us feel more in control of what we do, of what we're doing, of the actions that we take in our employment, the actions that we take in our relationships with one another. We can't think in one way and act in another, because in other words, people see us as confused, and people will see us as people that are kind of double-minded. So we have to give up the judgments, we have to give up the comparisons, because nothing can harm us more than comparing ourselves to someone else or comparing our life situations to other people's life situations. And that's why people resent people like Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates and all these people who have amassed fortunes from the ideas that came to them, that they took those ideas and went with them and created something so far greater than probably they even imagined at the time. Can you imagine Jeff Bezos, selling books out of his garage? Because Amazon.com, Amazon was originally just a bookseller. Can you imagine him realizing then just how big that company would become? I mean, I just read an article the other day that said that Amazon is going to open department stores. They're actually going to not only have their online, their internet, Amazon.com, but they're going to have department stores. They already own Whole Life Foods and the Washington Post newspaper. So can you imagine that guy and his wife, because his wife was with him, in that garage selling those books? And they probably didn't sell more than 5 or 10 books a day when they first started. Some days they may not even have sold any books. Can you imagine them thinking at that point how expansive that idea was going to become for them? But they kept doing what they did, and they had an interest in what they were doing, and they enjoyed what they were doing, and they were open to growth. They were open to expansion. And that's what each and every one of us must be. And the way we get there is through intuition. There's something within us that already knows where we can go, what we can do, what we can have, if we just let ourselves believe in it. I'll always remember, I'll never forget, one time I was living in Los Angeles and I had to move because my lease was up. So I had a list of about 24 places to go look at to find a new apartment to move into. And as I was busy in my work, I cut myself short and I had very little time to go. There's no way I could have gone to all 24 places. So as I was driving, I pulled over and I stopped and I said, I know the right place is going to come to me, that I'm going to know where to go and how to proceed to get that right apartment for myself. And as I looked up, I saw the street sign, and the street sign was one of the streets on my list, and so I followed it to that address, and believe it or not, that was the place that became mine. I didn't have to go to any other places. I only went to one. Out of the 24, I only went to one, but I found the perfect place with a beautiful fireplace, with a beautiful view. And I'll always remember how simple it is when we turn things over to that power within us that already knows. Remember, the power of life. That power of life is not just like the human power that we think of. It's intelligence. It's knowingness. It's all these things that can guide us and direct us to those things that are for us. So when we look at Judge Thomas Troward's Edinburgh Lectures, which, you know, you could study these for 20 years and not get everything that he wants us to know and that wants us to understand. But in his essay on intuition, he writes, "We have seen that the subjective mind is amenable to suggestion by the objective mind. But there is also an action of the subjective mind upon the objective." In other words, that unconscious mind within us, the subjective mind, also creates an action to the objective or the conscious mind, the surface mind. The individual subjective mind is their own innermost self, and its first care is the maintenance of the individuality of which it is the foundation. And since it is pure spirit, it has its continual existence in that plane of being where all things subsist in the universal here and now and the everlasting now, and consequently can inform the lower mind of things removed from its thoughts either by distance or futurity. As the absence of the conditions of time and space must logically concentrate all things into a present focus, we can assign no limit to the subjective mind's power of perception, and therefore the question arises, why does it not keep the objective mind continually informed on all points? And the answer is that it would do so if the objective mind were sufficiently trained to recognize the indications given, and to effect this training is one of the purposes of mental science. When once we recognize the position of the subjective mind as the supporter of the whole individual. Now remember, intuition is the voice of your gut instinct. It's the voice that never turns off. It's that gut instinct, that knowing. It's like I knew when I saw that street sign that I was headed to my right and perfect apartment. We cannot doubt that much of what we take to be the spontaneous movement of the objective mind has its origin in the subjective mind, prompting the objective mind in the right direction without our being consciously aware of it. Now, for all those who have studied the works of the great Dr. Joseph Murphy, you realize that subjective mind and subconscious are the same thing. It's the subconscious. It's below the conscious mind. Our conscious mind is filled with all the things that we can see, hear, feel, taste, and touch, and all the noise around us, but it's our subjective or subconscious mind that's always ready to bring forth to us the greater ideas, the greater thoughts, the greater feelings even about the things that are ours to receive, ours to do, ours to be. So its origin in the subjective mind prompting the objective mind in the right direction without our being consciously aware of it. Now we're talking about intuition, but at times when the urgency of the case seems to demand it, or when, for some reason yet unknown, the objective mind is for a while more closely in rapport with the subjective mind, the interior voice is heard strongly and persistently, and when this is the case, we do well to pay heed to it. Want of space forbids me to bring anything into this subject without ever bringing any doubt into your mind. The importance of understanding and following the intuition cannot be exaggerated, but I candidly admit the great practical difficulty of keeping the happy mean between the disregard of the interior voice and allowing ourselves to be run away with by groundless fancy. The best guide is the knowledge that comes of personal experience, which gradually leads to the acquisition of a sort of inward sense of touch that enables us to distinguish the true from the false and which appears to grow with a sincere desire for truth and with the recognition of the Spirit as its source. The only general principles we can deduce from our own experience, or that when, in spite of all appearances pointing in the direction of a certain line of conduct, there is still a persistent feeling that it should not be followed. In other words, our intuition will tell us either to go forward with something or to not go forward with something, to stop, even stop thinking about it, stop letting it into our mind. In the majority of instances, it will be found that the argument of the objective mind, however, correct on the facts objectively known, was deficient from ignorance of facts which could not be objectively known at the time, but which were known to the intuitive faculty. Another principle is that our very first impression of feeling on any subject is generally correct. If you get the feeling that something's not right, that something's wrong, that something's not working out in your mind, that this is for you, or for you to be it, for you to have it, or for you to do it, stop. Don't move forward until all levels of your mind, both objective and subjective, are in agreement that something is right for you. And the power of our subconscious mind comes from the power that we use through our actions and through our thoughts and our feelings, is when both our consciousness and our conscious mind are in agreement, The creative power is that receptive attitude of expectancy which makes a mold into which the plastic yet undifferentiated substance can flow and take the desired form. In other words, where our thoughts can take the desired flow and we recognize that it's the right thing for us. Before the objective mind has begun, we're going back to Troward, before the objective mind has begun to argue on the subject, it is like the surface of a smooth lake which clearly reflects the light from above, but as soon as it begins to argue from outside appearances, these also throw their reflections upon its surface, so that the original image becomes blurred and is no longer recognizable. This first conception is very speedily lost, and it should therefore be carefully observed and registered in the memory with a view of testing the various arguments which will subsequently arise on the objective plane. It is, however, impossible to reduce so interior an action as that of the intuition to the form of hard and fast rules, and beyond carefully noting particular cases as they occur, probably the best plan will be to include the whole subject of intuition in the general principle of the law of attraction, especially if we see how this law interacts with that personal quality of universal spirit of which we have already spoken. Remember, let's go back to those other words that we got from Troward. My mind is the center of divine operation. The divine operation is always for expansion and fuller expression. And this means the production of something beyond what has gone before, something entirely new, not included in past experience, though proceeding out of it by an orderly sequence of growth. Therefore, since the divine cannot change its inherent nature, it must operate in the same manner in you and me, consequently in our own special world, of which we are the center. It will move forward to produce new conditions, always in advance of any that have gone before. So let's think about those words and think about, what is it? What is it that brings us a greater sense of feeling that things are good for us, that life is good for us? Because that's what we want to get to. That's what we want to know. You know, Carolyn Myss, the great spiritual teacher, tells us that. And Carolyn Myss is an amazing woman. She used to do healing work where she would ask people questions about what was going on in their life, and she could tell what was going on with them physically, sometimes emotionally, mentally. And she was a great intuitive healer. Still is. She says your spirit is the part of your spirit, pardon me, I want to get this right. Your spirit is the part of you that feels like hope. Your spirit is the part of you that feels like hope. When no matter what's going on around us, that's from Carolyn Myss, if we still have hope, that's the spirit within us. That's the spirit of God itself. This great intelligence, power, and spirit that we talk about all the time and say it's God for lack of a better word. Hope is the spirit within us. It feels like hope. Why can she say that? Let's think about it. Nobody wants to feel hopeless. Nobody wants to feel hopeless. It's that hope that keeps us going, no matter how awful things may be around us, no matter what situations we're dealing with. If we're dealing with a divorce that hurts our heart, or if we're dealing with debt that makes us feel like we're just overwhelmed with paying our bills or paying our debts, whatever it is that disturbs our mind, if we can get ourselves still and get ourselves relaxed and allow ourselves to let the Spirit move through us and let our intuition bring us that thought, that idea, that feeling that will make us feel hope, that gives us hope, then we don't feel hopeless anymore. Then we don't feel like there's no answer, there's no solution. And so our mind is open to solutions. Our mind is open to having the idea come to us that will make everything turn around in our life. But it's up to us. It's up to us to let it come to us. Let's go back again. Belief in limitation is the one and only thing that causes limitation. Belief in limitation is the one and only thing that causes limitation. We can gradually grow into any condition we desire, provided we first make ourselves in habitual mental attitude the person who corresponds to those conditions. In other words, we must see ourselves being and living and enjoying the things that we want for our lives, that we accept for ourselves. It's up to us. Any anxious thought as to the means to be employed in the accomplishment of our purposes is quite unnecessary. If the end is already secured, and we know that if we listen to our intuition, if we follow our intuition, that it will be, and if we're seeing ourselves in it, we're seeing ourselves enjoying it, we see ourselves doing it, then it is secured, then it follows that all the steps leading to it are secured also. We've got to let ourselves do it. Desire will in due time externalize itself as concrete fact. Desire. That's the things we hope for. That's the things we want for ourselves. In due time, will externalize itself as concrete facts, but we cannot give up hope, and we cannot stop listening to our intuition. Our intuition, it's the voice of your gut instinct. It's the voice that never turns off. That's from Carolyn Myss. Your spirit is the part of you that feels like hope. Hope. Underline that word in your mind. Your spirit is the part of you that feels like hope. Once again, I want to thank you for being with me today. It's been my great pleasure to have you. And I hope you join me next week for the Way to a Wonderful Life, right here on WIMB World International Broadcasters, and on Sunday morning at 7 a.m. Pacific Time, 9 a.m. Central Time, 10 a.m. Eastern Time.